Greetings.
Hello.
Greetings.
My greetings. Well met.
I greet you.
Greetings, traveler.
Greetings, friend.
The pleasure is mine.
And if you think that's the best I'm going to do with sound this episode, you have seen nothing yet. Hello and welcome to episode 173 of Concede, a Hearthstone podcast dedicated to making the competitive side of the game more accessible to you. Joining you live from Gadgetzan, New York, it is me, Ridiculous Hat. From Karazhan, California, we have Botticus.
Hey, everybody.
From the Maelstrom, Louisiana, we have Appa.
Oh, hey.
And from the reaches of the internet, we have you, the listener. If you'd like to find out how you can support Concede and receive rewards in return, head to patreon.com/coinconcede. No new patrons this week, but we are still, as always, impressed and humbled by your generosity. And also, we love reviews, too. We haven't gotten a review in a little while, but it helps other people find the show. If you want to fill one out, hit one on iTunes. It really helps the show. How is life in Ladder? Appa, I'm going to talk to you last because yours is the most important. So, Botticus, you get to go first.
Things are going pretty good. I kind of wanted to try to finish the push for Legend. Didn't really get a whole ton of time to be able to do that. I think I peaked at around 1.3 with Elemental Mage, the same list that I've been working on. And yeah, I'm not too upset because I still got to go back down to rank 5. I don't have to worry about the floor. But I played one game, and I was alluding to this before the show. But have you guys seen Hakar Paladin?
No. I thought you were going to say Druid, because
Is
that
that-
one kind of makes sense.
That's with Liam,
No.
right? They Liam away their bloods?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, didn't realize that. So
Tice was playing that, right?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm just playing out, and I'm figuring out how this is going to happen. And I got Jaina going, and I'm gaining all my life back every turn, and hitting them with elementals. But we were basically dead even on cards, and they got a few bloods in their deck. I got a few bloods in my deck, and then Liam came out. And I was like, oh, guess I lose. But the sad part is, I had played Syndragosa, right? Yeah. And I got a Chameleos from Syndragosa, and the turn that I died, it revealed a Hemet Jungle Hunter. So if I had lived that turn, I think I took 24 damage or something from Bloods. But if it had gotten a turn earlier, I could have Hemeted the rest of the Bloods away, and then I would have only been taking one tick of fatigue every turn, or one slightly bigger tick of fatigue every turn. And I had so much value left in hand, it was kind of unfortunate, but it was a pretty fun game. It was one of the games where I was only moderately upset that I lost because Hakar Paladin. It was really weird. But they got a very, very large Linessa. I don't know if you know about that deck, but it plays bells. Ring the bells?
Oh, the Sound the Bells, the Echo Bell,
Yeah.
the 2 mana +1/+2 Echo spell.
Yeah, Linessa got 8 casts of Sound the
Ooh.
Bells.
That's
As well as 2
what potions of
Viper
heroism? Oh,
Steeds.
steeds.
Yeah.
Man.
It was a very large Linessa, and I was out of creepy dolls, voodoo dolls.
It's a shame you're not in Wild, because you could just devolve that and be like, gotcha.
Yeah, I didn't have any devolves in hand when I was playing Mage.
It's so crappy whenever they play Linessa in Standard now, because they play the Potion of Heroisms, and then even after you kill it, it's already gotten a 2-for-1 at that point. Because you have to spend a removal spell on it, and they've already recouped the card. And then if you don't have anything, that card's really sweet. I like that card.
Yeah, well, especially when it also poops out a dinosaur. It's 7 mana, 3/7 taunt, draw a card, Divine Shield, 2/6 taunt when it dies. That's good. That's a good card. I would play that card. We do play that card.
Like, even if I hex that at that point, I still feel behind. Just
Yeah,
like I
it's
had to
you.
reactively hex and I got a card off that.
You're like half a card behind, which is absurd. Yeah, there's tempo gain, I guess. Anyway, I finished.
So yeah, that's what I
Go
was
ahead.
playing. It was just I was gonna say that I was playing just against the most random stuff at rank 1 on the last day of ladder, and people just playing Hakar Druid and all variations of mage apparently, odd mage, big mage, other elemental mages. It was a weird end of the season. Anyway, go ahead, Had.
Yeah. I didn't play a ton of standard ladder. I still finished around rank 7 or so. I did dip my toe into wild just to try out decks that I'm planning on playing more this season because we're going to talk about it later, but the rank ladders are changing at lower ranks, and I'm at, I think, 22 in wild. And when that's only 3 stars to climb, it'll be a lot more palatable. And getting to play with Tinker's Sharp Sword Oil again was fun for one person, and that person was me. And my opponent got a lot of cannon shots in their silly priest face. So it worked out pretty well, but I didn't have the heart to start at rank 22 and play 5-star rank, so I banked a little bit of my time and spent it between other games, which we'll talk about, because in Eternal I did finish top 50, and we will talk about that after Appa describes his much more impressive accomplishment right now.
Bruh, the rank 25 to like legend grind right now is so awful. I did that last month whenever I scrubbed out in Philadelphia.
Well, no, it's the
Went back
first.
to my hotel room.
So now it's better.
What?
It's the first. So
Yeah, it's infinitely better now.
It's 3 stars now, up to rank 15, as opposed to
Yeah,
5
4 stars to rank 10.
I had to do the 5-star grind.
Yeah, you
last
did the
month.
full grind. It's even with win streaks, it just actually takes forever.
Yeah, like legit. Like when I scrubbed out in Philadelphia, I got an Uber back to my hotel room, ordered a Philly cheesesteak on Uber Eats, and then just played Wild Ladder. Got up to like rank 7 there in one night, and then had to do the rest, and it was a grind. But before I get into ladder for the week, I have another doctor's appointment story meme because apparently I have just random memes that happen to me. So I went to the doctor's appointment because I had a follow-up MRI done on my hip, and they had to do it with like contrast, where they like injected ink into my hip so they could like figure out what was going on. Good news is I got a definitive diagnosis. I've torn cartilage in my hip, which sucks, but they can do surgery on it. It's not a big deal. So I'm gonna get surgery on my knee and my hip. But before I found that out, my doctor's appointment was at 10. I got there at like 9:55, signed all my paperwork and everything, sat down. They handed me a little like buzzer, like those plastic buzzer things you get at restaurants that like vibrate when it's ready. They like handed me one of these, and I'm like, "What am I at Chili's? I thought this was a doctor's office." So I sat down and I waited like 30 minutes till that buzzed, and I got up. And then this nurse brings me to this side room, and she has somebody with her, and she's like, "This is so and so. She'll be joining us today." And I'm like, "Okay, I don't really know either of you, but that's fine." And it turned out that she was training this girl. So what should have taken like 5 minutes for her to ask me questions and me to fill out paperwork took me 30 minutes because she had to explain everything to this girl she was training. So I was like, "Oh my god, it's 11. I haven't seen anybody. Just let me go. Let me go figure out what's wrong." And then after that, I went back out to the waiting room. Then they brought me into the back. And then I went to the MRI room, which was the place I had to go to get the MRI, but they had to like make me fill out paperwork. So I did that, sat there for 30 more minutes. My phone was about to die, so I couldn't play anything on that. So I was like, "Oh my god, I didn't get any sleep last night. Just get me into the stupid MRI machine. I'm so tired." So they brought me to the room where they were going to do the injection, and then they got me on the table. They like got everything like cleaned and ready for the doctor to come in and do the injection. And then he comes in, and the lab tech there is like, "So are we ready to do the injection?" He's like, he said something that basically translated to, "No, I'm helping this dude who's dying right now in another room." It's like, okay. He was like having a hemorrhage from his chest or something. So I was like, "Yeah, you do that. I can wait." So I laid on the table for an hour and a half before he finished saving this dude's life. And then he's like, all right, let's do this injection. And he came in and he did that. And then I went to the MRI room, finally got everything taken care of. And then I got my MRI done, which I fell asleep 3 separate times during. But all in all, the appointment that was scheduled at 10 finished at 1:30. So that was. Oh, and then after I got the injection, actually, this is my favorite part. I had to use the bathroom really bad because I was laying on a table with like cold alcohol on my hip area for like an hour and a half, so I had to pee really bad. So after I was done shuffling down the hall, I was like, "Is there a bathroom over here?" And the lab tech points me to the bathroom, and I go in, and I'm in one of these like hospital gowns, which is like the most vulnerable clothing you will ever wear in your life, and I'm using the bathroom, which is the most vulnerable position you can ever be in. And then the freaking fire alarm goes off in the hospital. I'm like, are you kidding me? Bruh, come on. Luckily, it was a false alarm, but I was like, you know what? If there's a fire, I'm going to finish. I don't care. So I finished using the bathroom and then got out. And then the MRI lady met me and she was like, it's a false alarm. Don't worry about it. Yeah, so that was, I felt like that was just a series of unfortunate events that was podcast worthy.
We're going to rename the
Did you-
podcast Concede, the podcast where the host take an inordinate amount of time to get medical support.
Did you ask to talk to the manager so you could get in a coupon for your next visit?
A coupon for my next MRI with contrast on my right hip.
Yeah, I mean, if they're gonna give you the plastic weighting thing like an Applebee's, you might as well get a.
Yes,
might
can
as
I
well
get
your next?
Can I get 2-for-1 margaritas with my next visit, please?
Yeah. Next time,
Yeah.
ask them for appetizers.
Appetizers.
Yep.
Yeah, so that was my doctor's appointment. But good news is they found out what's wrong, and I can get that fixed. But anyways, on to ladder. So ladder this month has been something else. I haven't been playing a ton of standard. I finished at rank 3 in standard. I played a little bit, but not a ton. Because I was focusing on wild pretty much all this month because I really wanted to qualify for the wild playoffs because I really like the format and I think I'm pretty good. And whenever I'm playing well, like I feel like I can compete with like really good players. So I was really trying for that. And this past week was actually pretty rough because I have this thing that I just do at the end of months. Like whenever I'm not climbing like I feel like I need to be, I just start tilting. Just in general, I start getting frustrated or like upset or like discouraged, and I just play worse as a result. And I went from around rank 250 legend 3 days ago, which was the 28th, to around 500, and then I climbed up to 300, and then I tilted back down to past 600, which is like very low wild legend for last month, and I tilted down there on the 30th. So on the last day of the month, I woke up and I was like rank 610, I think. And usually in the past, like I would just look at my rank and just be like, it's not worth all this grinding. Like I just don't want to do this. And then I'd come on the podcast and just be like, hey, guess what? You know that thing I wanted to do? I didn't get there again. Like every time Appa wants to do something. So I went to my doctor's appointment and I came back home and I was just like, I can either throw away this entire month's work to have to be a little uncomfortable grinding, or I can actually like pick up even shaman and because I know how to play it well and just buckle down and try and beat some people in wild, or I can just give up. So came home, I got coffee. I was like, I'm just gonna do this. I'm just gonna sit down and I'm gonna play. And I went like 20-7 or something, and I was up to like rank 200 or something like that. And then Cream Puff, I was talking to him a little bit because he was saying that like around 110 into top 100 was like a really serious grind. So I was like, how's the climb going for you? We started talking, and I was like, yeah, I'm honestly an anxious wreck right now because I just have horrible ladder anxiety, which is part of the reason I don't really like doing the ladder grind. But he basically gave me a little pep talk, which I'm not even sure if he knew it was a pep talk. I think he was also saying this for himself too, but he was like, all right, look, we're just going to have screw it attitudes. Whatever happens, happens. We're just going to play well, then the chips will fall where they do. And that stuck with me throughout the entire night, because whenever I didn't want to play because I was getting close and just getting really, really nervous, I would just hit the play button and just be like, look, just play tight. Whatever happens, happens. You're going to lose some games. You're going to win some games. And I just kept winning games and winning and winning and winning. And I got up to rank 111. I was in the middle of a game, and I have Jonah Raw on my friends list, who's a pretty big WoW player, because we tested for Philadelphia together. And he was in Control stream with like 4 other people, and they were doing like Watchstone basically for the end of the month while they were camping on their ranks. And I was watching his stream on the side, and Jonah was like, "Oh, Appa's like 111. Let's spectate him." So they all sent me friend requests, like Control, Get Me Out, Bananaramic, Jonah, and I was just like, "Oh my god, this is too much pressure." But I won my game at 111. I went up to 106, and I was like, "Oh, 5 ranks for a win. Oh no, I'm gonna be sick." and that was just, at that point I was just like, oh my god. So I had to like collect myself, and then I won again, and I jumped up to 97, and Jonah was like, one more win and you're in, and I'm like, I'm only at 97. And then I queued up again, and I beat Reno Lock, and I shot up to 25. Because the way the Wild Ladder was working was there was a gigantic clump of people in the middle who were camping with relatively the same MMR, and my win rate was just the nuttiest thing ever. So basically, when I got into top 100, it just put me above all of those players who were camping, because my win rate was 40 and 16 yesterday. That's like the most Hearthstone I've ever played in a day, and oh man, it was a grind.
Dude, okay, so the percentage is crazy. 56 games in 24 hours is not okay. Like, good lord, how did you have to go back for the other MRI?
Wait, what?
Because of Hearthstone? Too much Hearthstone? Did you break something?
No,
No. Well, good.
I didn't break anything.
Because you had a
on
coupon.
Hearthstone. Yeah, it was quite a bit. I didn't even realize how much Hearthstone I was playing. I was just like,
how many
I was
hours
just
was that?
completely like I was seeing the Matrix. I was just in the zone. I was like, I don't care. I made like a chill playlist on Spotify 2 days ago to prepare me for yesterday, and I was just doing that. I didn't even realize how much Hearthstone I had played. Like, I saw my win rate going up, but like it didn't really hit me what that meant until I got the message that was like, you can no longer earn gold today. And I was like, oh no, that's 30 wins. That's so many. And at that point I was like 30 and like 8 losses or something like that. So yeah, but I mean, I just kept hitting the play button and we got there. So I played against Insom like 7 times yesterday. Beat him like 5. I gate kept him on Dr. J's stream over and over. So that was good memes. But yeah, I did it. I qualified for Wild Playoffs, and I'm honestly super proud of myself because I've
And you
never
should
had
be.
I've never had a top 100 Wild finish before, because I am a complete anxious mess when it comes to ladder, and I just try and stay away from it, and then I make excuses. But this month, like, I'm really trying to take Hearthstone seriously this year, and this month I was just like, nope, I'm gonna buckle down. We're just gonna try. I'm gonna put myself out there. If I can't get there, I can't get there. But if I can't and I tried, at least I tried. And we got there. I decayed all the way down to 63 before reset from 25, but I got in at 25. So that was super hype.
That's quite the
Well,
decay.
I'm super proud of you, Appa. I
Yeah,
always knew you could do it, but seeing it happen is just really awesome, and it's really cool. I'm excited to see how you do in the playoffs. I have faith.
It's really weird too, because like, I don't think this is a bigger accomplishment for me than like doing well in tournaments. but it feels better to me for some reason. Just because I feel like this is like eluded me for so long, like a top 100 finish, and like finally getting it after like 4 years of playing the game almost is like it just feels really good.
Well, also, like, tournaments have always kind of been your thing, the thing you focus on, the thing that you've been good at, the thing you've had good results at, and you've always talked about your extreme anxiety with ladder and how you're not a huge fan of it and the best of ones and everything. So just seeing you get this accomplishment, I think, just really solidifies how much you're still growing as a player, and the fact that you can, when you put your mind to it, you really can overcome something that you're not necessarily wanting to put your not saying not want to put your full focus into, but something that you don't necessarily uh, w- want to do, but you know you needed to do it to be able to achieve the goal you were looking for.
Yeah, feels good. Just feels nice.
Nice job, man. It's really, really difficult, and I think uh, it's hard to express what kind of anxiety-provoking experience super high ladder is, especially that you're adding that literally everyone was watching you in-game and you were streamed on. You were on Dr. J's Watchstone, you were on Control's Watchstone, and you were just chilling. You were playing Merc Spark Eels and Fire Elementals and killing people. And
Yeah, I think a lot of it is also that I was just playing like a class that I am just beyond comfortable with. Like most of the lines were just really easy for me to see. I made some like loose lines, but I had justifications for them like on stream. But I mean, I was just really comfortable with the class too, because I mean, I was just playing even shaman, so that's just it just felt right. I don't know. I feel like just all those stuff lined up, and then I played relatively well over the course of the day. So
yeah, and your list was really solid too. I think you got it from Lost Head, if I recall correctly.
yeah, I got it from Lost Head, and he got it from somebody else. I forget who, but I retweeted it after he um tweeted at me, and he was like, "Hey, this is actually this guy's list." But apparently, I'm getting credit for it now. What it did was uh like traditional, just like plain even shaman and wild plays 2 Galaka crawlers, and then plays like Flame Wreath Faceless and all the just generic stuff. And this list actually cut both Galaka crawlers, both Flame Wreath Facelesses, which sounds insane, but I'll get to the justification in a second. And then plays a Hex, a Ragnaros, an Acidic Swamp Ooze, and oh man, what was the fourth? Oh wait, no, the Rags in there generally, and then the 2 extra slots were actually Fire Elementals. And cutting the 7/7s, I saw the list and I was like, this looks so insane, it has to be good. Because like you don't just cut 7/7s without justification. And it's really, really insane in the mirror, because one of the biggest ways you lose the mirror like on the spot is if you play a 7/7 while you're behind, or have to coin out a 7/7 to get board presence, and then they just devolve with tempo and are able to value trade into your 3/3. You just lose the game instantly. So just not having those in your deck, and then having cards like Fire Elemental that can come down and like kill a Flametongue totem, or like help you value trade into a bigger minion, are just like really good. And the Acidic Swamp Ooze was really nice. Like this deck was definitely tech to beat Q Block, which was super popular on the last day. And because you need to be able to Hex Mal'Ganis and Void Lords when they come down, because sometimes Devolve just isn't good enough. Devolve's really good against Void Caller, but if they have Void Caller Sack Pact, then you don't really want to be devolving a 9-drop, because I mean 8-drops are still pretty good. So having the extra Hex in there was really good. And then having Ooze for Skull, it was really well situated for the meta I was facing, which was Rogue Shaman and Q Block. So yeah, the list was really interesting, and it was pretty spicy. It was really good for the mirror. Somebody played Wind Fury against me on their Flame Wreath Faceless, and I was like, okay, devolve 2 for 1 you've lost.
And if anyone is interested in playing this list, Appa retweeted it. It'll be good until Tuesday, and then
Man.
he'll have to try something else. Yeah.
I got some wild shaman decks in my back pocket. I got to turn 7 somebody this past week with Malagos Shaman.
Ooh.
Yeah, my hand was the nuts. It was is it Ancestor's Call? That's the 4-mana one, right?
Yes.
Yeah, Ancestor's Call, and then I had Malagos, and I had Emperored all of my Totemic Smashes and Frost Shocks and Lightning Bolts in my hand, and I went, Ancestor's Call you. Don't care what you pull, take 1,000,000.
Yep.
So
You
that
just
deck's fun. It's actually surprisingly good and wild. Like if your opponent's trying to like cheat, you just keep them honest with the goose.
And then you killed him in the face.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well done, Appa. And there's definitely a conversation to be had about the experience of high legend ladder. But also, there's a lot of other conversations to be had this week. So we will transition right into the news because there's some stuff.
So we were gonna have a ton of news to talk, or a good amount of news to talk about Wednesday. We're actually recording Friday for the listeners who aren't able to make it live, but we delayed the episode till Friday, and on Thursday they decided to drop a gigantic bomb on us, and a whole ton of, well, a good amount of balance changes are going to be coming to us on February 5th. And so many changes that we're actually going to talk about all of them in the decksplanation segment. So you have that to look forward to later in the show.
I want to point out I delayed the show because I wasn't feeling well, which I am now retroactively calling a disturbance in the force that I detected, because there's no other logical explanation for why I would just randomly be mildly ill on Wednesday for 24 hours, and then they come and just change everything.
Yeah, there's a lot of changes. They're going to go live February 5th. We'll talk about it in explanations. The next news item we have is a ranked play update. So now no longer will every rank be subject to 5 stars. From rank 50 to rank 16, it will take 3 stars for you to go up a rank. From 15 to 11, it'll take 4 stars, and it'll stay the same for rank 10 to rank 1. This is the same model they had, I believe. Like these were the exact star requirements before, right? But before
Yeah, I
the
think
changes.
before it was 3 stars up through 15, 4 stars from 15 through 11, and then 5 stars 10 and up. Yeah, it is a reversion, except for
Yes.
26 through 50 were just made for 5 stars.
Yeah, so this is just a great change, right? This was kind of what we were talking about just a couple months ago, where we had listeners contacting us through emails and Discord saying that, it might be okay for us who are usually playing around, the legend or rank 5 to rank 1. It's pretty easy to maintain that for us, but for the people who are playing at some of the lower ranks, it's nearly impossible to maintain the ranks falling back 4 ranks. There was so many stars that it would require, so people were feeling disincentivized from playing because it just took so long for you to be able to rank up, and ranking up didn't feel as good. So I'm really hoping that the reverting this back to a reduced number of stars to rank up can breathe a little life into the people who may not be playing necessarily at the rank 5 to legend section of the game. But what do you guys think? I think we're all pretty positive about this change, I assume.
Yeah, if this had been changed last month, December, because last month is technically January. But if this was changed in January, that would have made my wild ladder climb from 25 way more enjoyable, because it felt like I was mowing the grass the whole time I was doing it. I was like, I'm just doing chores. This is taking forever. Oh my god, how am I still at rank 8? I've won like 4 games.
But at the same time, you're like simultaneously a Disney villain, just speed bumping people that are trying to have a good time. You're just like Cruella DeVille, and they just want to have puppies, and you're like, no, they're my puppies. And the whole time, just running people over, and at the same time, it's not fun for you, and it's not fun for them. So
Yeah, like part of me like feels bad, but then I'm just like, the more games I win, the quicker I get out of this, the less they have to deal with me. Like,
yeah, but it makes a lot of sense because this returns the feeling of progression for people that play less often at lower ranks. It is a strict upgrade because the feeling of progression is something that we've talked about. Hearthstone has been limited on for, well, since March, when you would reset less and move less because the ranks expanded. It used to be, what, 3 stars versus 5 stars. From 20 through 16 is now 15 stars instead of 25. It is a 40% reduction, a dramatic change in the volume of games played. Someone that only goes 50-50 and might win streak once in a while or wins a little bit more than 50-50 is so much more likely to see more numbers now. It's just a better thing. It encourages players to come back from the game because they no longer feel like it'll take longer for them to climb up through the lower ranks to the higher ranks. It's just a big net win. And I have heard, if we devil's advocate a little bit, I have heard people that wonder if it'll just mean that people kind of get accelerated to a higher rank that may not be quote-unquote accurate. But I do think that when you accelerate people to the rank 10 floor, they're going to run into players with a little bit more skill or experience faster, and they'll be kind of kept at that line. Even if we concentrate a few more people at a higher rank, I think that'll just introduce them to what the next level of gameplay can look like a little faster, and that might encourage them to spend more or play more to get over that hump, as opposed to they don't play more because what's the point, I don't have enough time. And I think that's just a big win.
Yeah, I feel like this change makes it, you still reset like the same amount every month, so it's still kind of like you're doing, like you're still in a like skill tier, so it's still kind of like placements, but I feel like it's going to feel a lot less as though you're locked in that skill tier. Like you may be able to like push out of it a little easier and then play against better players and improve from that. So I feel like this is just a good change all around.
Yep, should be great. Or actually, that's live now. So if you're in those ranks, look forward to the less star requirement. The next news item we have here is that the Lunar New Year will be starting on Tuesday, February 5th. So you can log in to get a free golden fireworks tech, which is a pretty sweet card. And yeah, it's just a small little promotion they're doing, goes until February 12th. And along with this, they have a cool little Lunar New Year bundle, which includes 10 packs each from Witchwood, Boomsday, and Rumble. And it's only $20. So they're doing a lot of these. They've been doing a lot of these packs lately. I mean, it seems like the price point, or they might be looking to find a bit of a lower price point for some of these bundles for people to buy stuff more often, or they're not selling that many packs, which it might be a mix of both. But it feels like there's a lot more bundles recently. What do you guys think?
I have a conspiracy theory.
I enjoy value bundles, so
Yeah, that
keep 'em
too.
coming.
Also, yes, but I have a conspiracy theory that we will discuss much later in the episode. But yes, they are doing more of these, and I do believe it is probably related to the amount of packs they are not selling.
All right.
More to come later.
Well, okay, more to come later. I'm interested to hear. Had teased this before the podcast too. I want to hear this.
I think I see
conspiracy
where he's
theory
going with
later.
this.
I also do too.
I hope that I have an
so-
M. Night Shyamalan level plot twist.
Okay. This month's cardback is Pizza Stone. So for all of you pizza lovers out there that like pizza, you can get this cool card back. I'm sure a lot of people will like this.
I think you just mean all you people out there. 'Cause
Yeah.
I think liking pizza and being a person is just
Oh.
like synonymous.
No,
Am I
you're
not a
you're
person?
opening the door right now. You're opening the door for him. Appa, you remember the last time that we allowed Botticus to voice an opinion? He called a dog a liar. That was what happened the last
Oh,
time
no.
we let Botticus talk about his
Oh,
opinions.
no.
Botticus, why don't you tell us about your opinions
I
about
hate
pizza?
and Gary. Botticus 2019.
Okay, I don't hate pizza. I just don't eat what you would consider pizza
Wait,
because my pizza doesn't have sauce on it because I don't like tomato sauce.
so you like garlic bread?
No cheese. I don't like garlic. Ew.
So you like bread with cheese?
Cheese bread. Yeah.
And
what I
notice-
usually get from
notice
pizza
how-
places.
Appa said he hates pizza and Gary, and Appa says I don't hate pizza. And he just says I don't hate pizza. But we get nothing on Gary.
What? I don't hate Gary either.
That was
Why are
prompted.
you
ju- He just thinks Gary is disingenuous and lied on his job application.
Yeah, that's called America.
Okay, this went from dog memes to deep stuff real quick.
It's fine. Keep going. Keep going.
Okay, so yeah, get the card back. Yeah. The next news item we have here was the Twitch Rivals Arena Draft Challenge happened. And I believe Abukta won from the Lightforge podcast. I forgot who his teammate was. I should have had this tab open.
I'm gonna guess Merps.
No, Merps wasn't on his team. Unless he has a different name.
Didn't Faeli finish first? Or was he second? He was up there, because that dude's nuts at Hearthstone.
Okay, according to the unofficial leaderboard, ADWCTA and TTEXXX got first, and then Educated Collins and Faeli got second.
There are not a lot of
Uh,
syllables in that first place team. Very few syllables.
And then rounding out third was Dreads and Boozor TV, and then Hafu and Dog in fourth, and a bunch more later down. Is TTEXXX, is that Merps? I'm trying to see if he was on.
No, I have no idea who that is. Wait, hold on. Do you have questions about Dog's credentials?
No.
But he's not a real dog.
Oh God.
I just want to see where the line is. We have a problem with a dog named Gary. Do we have a problem with a person named Dog?
I think what it is dogs pretending to be people or in people positions is not okay. But people pretending to be dogs is fine.
This is worse than the Botticus is a priest main meme.
Oh man, just you wait until the meme. I have more memes coming.
Oh God!
I stocked up the
podcast.
soundboard.
I'm done. It's over. It was good. It was a good run. Thank you to all the listeners who enjoyed my content.
Yeah, this is gonna.
I'm just gonna be done.
I'm looking forward to the
sorry.
editing process because I get to cut all of this out. What's next, Botticus? What else do we have?
Okay. The last news item we have was Iksar went into a bit of talk about Naxx. I saw a little bit of this, but I really didn't get a chance to dive into it. Did either of you have a chance to look through some of his comments about the original Naxx cards?
Yes, and this was on a post on this day in history. The Undertaker nerf was announced on January 27, 2015. This was also posted by Xija Hong, friend of the show, and Hearthstone community mogul, I guess. He's kind of everywhere. And Iksar actually went line by line with a few cards, including Undertaker and Deathlord and Mad Scientist. And the Mad Scientist blurb, definitely one of the strongest cards we ever made, but that was something we knew going in. Well, he's right. And I don't think Science is a good example of a classic or basic card, but as an adventure card that eventually leaves standard, I think it did a great job. And a big understatement as well. Undertaker was just a miss in terms of balance. You don't say. But, of course, he goes into more detail here. It's actually kind of fascinating to read how they dug through some of these cards, and Voidcaller, in particular, I think is the most interesting. A good example of a card that I'm glad exists, wouldn't change, and would not make in present-day Hearthstone. And that's a really interesting perspective from a designer, And there's some merit to that, right? Of saying, I wouldn't make this card now, but the fact that it existed opened up a lot of design opportunity for us and creates cool scenarios on board. Now, I'm going to say, having played against a bunch of turn 3 Malganis, I didn't love that, but I do agree that Void Color is a cool card, and I'm also really glad they will never make this again. So, it's really interesting to take a look at these notes, and I would definitely check them out, because getting the behind-the-scenes look is definitely worth it.
Yep, so that's the news. Lots of kind of cool things happened the last week, but I'm really excited to hear what you guys have to say about the balance updates. But before that, I think we have to get into the tournament section.
It's the grand tournament!
And this was the last weekend where we have HCT qualifiers until the World Championships on February 28th, about 4 weeks from now. And it was HCT APAC this weekend. The 4 players that qualified: Roger, Definition, Tyler, and Tensoku. Yes, that Roger, unfortunately. But Definition, Tyler, and Tensoku also qualified, and big props to Tyler. I know he worked hard and had quite the year. Jinsu, Aojiru, Coco Sasa, and Glory rounded out the top 8, so almost everybody here was a returning player. Definition is the only one I hadn't seen before, but it was a star-studded top 8 for sure. When you look at the meta, the most popular class was Paladin. Now, the top lineups, all of them had Paladin. All of them had Hunter. Roger was tied for first with Mid Hunter, Even Paladin, Odd Rogue, and Even Warlock. I want to point out that this qualifies as aggro in 2019. We've got Definition with Mid Hunter, Egg Paladin, Clone Priest, and Quest Rogue. Tyler had the super aggro lineup of Secret Hunter, Even Paladin, Odd Rogue, and Even Shaman. And Tensoku had Secret Hunter, Even Paladin, Clone Priest, and Odd Rogue. So, lots of Hunters, lots of Paladins. The Paladins were actually pretty evenly mixed, but it was mostly Even Paladin in the top 4, despite 90% of the Paladin decks that were brought to the event were either even or double OTK. No OTK representation in the qualifying decks. And you can tell the lineups here were very much about the players shifting their strategies to counter combo however possible, usually by being a little bit faster, which is why I think you see the Quest Rogue, why I think you see the Even Shaman, and even the Even Warlock. And Even Paladin as well is a pretty aggressive deck, especially with the amount of burst damage that it has. So, lots of Even Paladin, lots of OTK Paladin. Hunter, there were 67 Hunters, 70% were the secret deck, the hybrid secret deck, the Wire list. About 20% were mid-range, a small representation of Cube, and a tiny bit of Spell Hunters. For the Priests, there were 59 of those. Half of those were Xerix Priests, a third were Dragon Control Priests, about a sixth were APM. The number of rogues that we had, 2/3 of the 55 rogues were odd, and the last third was Quest, except for a couple oddballs that decided to play Mali. Warlock was...
Excuse me?
Couple
They played
oddballs.
what?
Mali Rogue?
Mali Rogue.
Yeah.
That's a deck?
No.
Cobalt Illusionist, Necro.
I mean, okay. It's a thing you can do. 2 people played it, and you'll notice that none of them were in the top 16. I wouldn't call it a deck. I would call it a thing that people did.
But it seems sweet.
Sure,
and
okay.
I want to play it.
You can.
On the sweet scale, it's a 10.
Yeah.
10 out of 10 sweetness.
No, it's a 4 out of 12.
I want to play it.
So anyways, Botticus, you're welcome to play Mali Rogue,
Actually-
and much like the people that brought it, you are unlikely to qualify through Asia playoffs if you play it.
I want to retract my statements that I've had for the past few weeks of wanting to see Hat's face when we're recording the podcast, because now every time he makes a terrible pun like that, I just get to see his grin just staring at us as
Yeah.
he revels in our dismay from hearing what he just said.
If you want to complain to somebody about that, I might recommend my fiance, because she is the president of that anti-fan club. Anyways, so from Rogue to Warlock, there's an enormous drop. Only 28 players brought Warlock. 3 out of 4 players, Mechathune Warlock. What is wrong with this world? How is Mechathune Warlock by far the most popular Warlock deck? About 1 out of 5 of those players brought even Warlock. Literally 1 person played Cube Warlock. 1 person. There are 20 Druids. Half were Hakar, with a sprinkling of Malygos, a little bit of Togwaggle here. 1 Taunt, 1 Mechathune. And then below Druid, there's another huge drop. 7 Mages. 6 were Big Spell. And 1 brave little Odd Mage that just wanted to Pyromaniac his little heart out. Didn't. 6 little Warriors. Half of them pressed Tank Up. Half of them pressed Tank Up and played a 1-mana spell on turn 1 every game. Called Fireplume's Heart. And then all the way at the bottom, 4 little Shaman. 3 even. And 1 tiny little Peanut Shaman. It's unfortunate that they got their most powerful and only relevant classic card taken away from them.
R.I.P. even Shaman.
Yeah. Well, it's R.I.P. Shaman is a playable standard deck class thing. Yeah. Because back in Classic, the best turn 1 play was Coin Totem, so you could Flametongue on 2, and you can't even do that anymore. I'm
You
sad.
could probably still play Kibler Shaman.
The-
I don't think that plays.
What is Kibler Shaman?
Well, I don't know if it's Kibler Shaman. It's the Dragon Elemental Shaman. I don't think.
I
that
mean, I guess
plays-
that's Kibler Shaman. It sounds like Kibler Shaman. I didn't know what it was until right now. But if you told me it's a Dragon Elemental Shaman deck, I'd believe that Kibler made it. Anyways, we have some quick hits. Some highlights. But I like calling the segment quick hits, so we're going to hit them real quick. HCM versus Hanbi. Round 5, Game 5. This game is crazy. It shows the stupidity of this format because the survivability tools of OTK Paladin are absurd, and the relentless pressure from Cube Hunter is equally absurd. There was a crazy 15-minute back and forth here, and 15 minutes after they cut to the game, this was the backup stream match in round 5. They are already a few turns into it, and it went forever, and HCM had this crazy huge board with like 2 dinosaurs and a King Crush and a cube and a couple eggs and like a bunch of stuff, and Hanbi just kept not being dead. Over and over again, he just kept not being dead, and you think he's dead, and it's like, nope, here's a Shirvala, and I'll make again, and then here's a board clear, and then here's a timeout, and he timed out defensively twice, while he was not on the offensive and ready to win, but just to survive. At a timeout, just to survive as a Frost Nova. And he had a real shot to win. Down at the end of the game, he had a 1 out of 3 chance to YOLO Holy Wrath and take the win, but wasn't able to get it. But it was a really, really impressive series of events. And it was more interesting than it sounds, and it sounds pretty cool. Citizen Appa versus Jinsu, round 7, game 1. Odd Rogue versus Cube Hunter again. And this is where we kind of look at Witchwood Grizzly versus Vilespine Slayer. They're both really good cards, but Witchwood Grizzly is much better when there's no Vilespine Slayer. And the entire game, Citizen Appa was just waiting for the Vilespine Slayer to punch through the 1 taunt that was always left behind on the board. He had to use Leroy as a pseudo-Vilespine, but after clearing out the first Witchwood Grizzly, Defender of Argus kind of stabilized the game against a hand without a lot of gas. First Grizzly was good, the second Grizzly was better, and the game got turned around very quickly, even though Jinsu was down to about 7 life on about turn 7, and just held on for dear life, gummed up the board, flipped it, and cleared things out before that Vilespine finally came down in time to save Nappa. And then Tyler versus Aljiro in the top 8 decider match. Do you want to know where Zihi is absolutely the best it can possibly be? When your opponent is playing a Mechathune deck, and they just hit Fatigue. So Aljiro was playing Mechathune Warlock, and had completely cleared the board with Godfrey, including killing Lich King, and Tyler had nothing on board, and Aljiro was at like 24, and he hits Fatigue, and the next turn he's going to kill Tyler, and Tyler's like, oh, you have 5 mana now. And then 2 turns later, the game was over, and it wasn't the Warlock that had won, because the Warlock had to defensively Cataclysm just to survive. which was also kind of a concession, because you can't really defensively Cataclysm and Fatigue as Mechathune Warlock. So, if you want to see Zihi in action in peak form, this is where to watch it. The top 8 decider match, Tyler versus Aojiro. And coming soon, well, not a lot this weekend. We've got the Wild Open on the 23rd, I believe. The Varsity for TESPA starts on February 18th. And then the HCT Winter Champs are on February 28th. But we do have something right now that's cool and exciting. The Coin Concede listener, totally not a league series strike thing that Appa and I are both playing in. And Appa, you actually played a match of Strike earlier this week. Tell us what that was like, because I think so many of our listeners, and us as hosts, have not played any Strike format series, and it seems really cool.
Yeah, I've played versus Markshire. We set it up to play right before the podcast on Wednesday, and then we didn't do the podcast. But anyways, we played on Wednesday night, and yeah, it was a really interesting experience. Both me and Markshire after the game were like, or after the match, we were like, this ban phase is a lot more complex. It has a lot more game to it than like either of us thought, because there's just like so many different things you could bring, and we were talking about how it probably favors more polarized decks, because with Strike you both bring 3 classes and you ban matchups. So I think I banned my Q block versus his Odd Rogue, and then my Clone and Gallery Priest versus his Odd Rogue, and then he banned like my Priest versus his Hunter, and then there was, I think, anyways, there was another ban in there that was bad for me. But you basically got to pick like the 2 worst things for you and ban those, and then you had 5 left, and then you played through all those matchups. I ended up losing 1-3. I was pretty unfavored after the ban process, so I'll probably be changing my strategy up for next week, but I'll also probably bring some memes, because I'm just playing it for fun, because I wanted to try the Strike format out. But it's really interesting, and I think it has a lot of depth to it.
Yeah, we've gotten some feedback already that it's very, very different, because unlike Conquest or Last Hero Standing, it is deterministic which matchups you are playing. There is no randomness in who brings what, because you play every matchup once, and you know what you're playing as soon as the ban phase is over. The only way to avoid playing those matchups is to ban them. So I think it's a very interesting and fresh tournament format. It's ongoing right now, and we're going to run, I think, 4 weeks of Swiss, and then cut to the top 8. And after the top 8, if people like it, we might run another one, or we might run a different format, but we have a pretty decent number of people playing. I think we're at like 30-ish or so. But we'd love to keep these rolling throughout the year, just to create a kind of mode where people can try some tournament-style gameplay. Yeah. And that's it for the tournament section. But before we go to the decksplanations, I want to take a little trip down memory lane. Do you all remember, do you think that Blizzard will change any cards in Hunter before the rotation? Yes or no?
No.
They sneak nerf Druid, yes. They are unpredictable. They're going to do whatever they think is going to get more people to play.
I'm going to go with yes for that last sentence.
What a surprise, Botticus was wrong.
Botticus.
It's almost like I sniped that one. It seems like I got it right. Hit the nail on the head.
It's not just that you're wrong. It's that you let me get an opportunity to enhance my soundboard.
Wrong, 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 wrong. Wrong, 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 wrong. You're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong.
I like how he ended the segment on that and was like, all right, immediate transition. Can't say anything now.
Well, if I wasn't quitting before, I'm definitely quitting now.
Oh, Botticus, thank you for giving us so much lovely content and companionship while you do it.
Look,
As
in,
as
in,
long as the listeners enjoy it, I'm fine with it.
in
I
that
feel
little
confident
clip,
they do.
I referenced them sneak nerfing Druid, and they sneak nerfed Hunter before champs. What are they gonna sneak nerf next?
Well, they sneak nerfed Wild Ladder, or not Wild Ladder. They sneak nerfed the number of stars you need for Ladder too. They might change more stuff. I don't know. So what did they change, Appa?
Anyways,
What did they change?
so yeah, decksplanations this week. I mean, y'all really didn't think we were gonna get out of here and not just talk for hours about these nerfs, right? Maybe not hours, but we're gonna talk for a hot minute about these nerfs because there is a lot to unpack here. So the nerfs are scheduled for February 5th, and the changes are that Cold Blood is up from 1 mana to 2 mana, Flametongue is from 2 mana to 3 mana, Quality is from 2 mana to 4, Hunter's Mark joins a very exclusive club of cards that have been nerfed twice. It's up from 1 mana to 2 mana, and Emerald Spellstone is up from 5 to 6. And I'll go into some of my takeaways here, and then we're just gonna have a lot to talk about. So whenever I was looking at these, what I took away from this was that Gen and Baku are sticking around. And it seems like they're all in on Gen and Baku. Whether that's good or not, probably not. But this is the development philosophy they have right now. So they're gonna nerf around Gen and Baku. It seems like they're trying to curate the classic and basic set as opposed to rotating them. And Kibler is kind of super against that. And I linked the thread to him between him and Iksar, and I'm sure we'll get into that more later. Pretty much all of the nerfs, except specifically Emerald Spellstone, and to some extent Hunter's Mark, look to be nerfs looking ahead specifically toward champs and rotation. Because we've talked about it on the show before, how Even Shaman looks like it's probably going to be pretty strong post-rotation because it's not losing a ton. It's losing some reasonably powerful cards, but like not any of its core stuff. Same thing with Odd Rogue. Like they lose Vilespine, but I mean, you still have the really solid aggressive starts. And nerfing Coldblood and Flametongue Totem take away a lot. And with a quality nerf as well. Even Paladin is much harder to make work, and Control Paladin gets a little bit worse. Almost all of these nerfs are just nerfs on pure efficiency. Like all of these cards have been too efficient for a long time. It's like the nerfs we saw with Fire War X and Hex and Execute and all that stuff. It's like these cards are too efficient. They're a little too good for what they do. Gonna nerf them. So like, what do these nerfs mean to me? Cold Blood, it's still powerful because 2 mana for 4 damage is still pretty good, but it's undeniably much worse. You can't run it on Odd Rogue, so that neuters the deck a lot. This nerf helps to make Odd Rogue not the clear-cut best aggro deck. Because in a post-rotation world where it's like Even Shaman and Odd Rogue beats Even Shaman a lot because just the dagger puts so much pressure on other aggro decks. Basically puts pressure on their existence. You have to pass the poison dagger like test if you're gonna play an aggro deck in this format. Like if you can't beat a 2 mana weapon, a 2/2 on turn 2, like you're in a rough spot. The Flametongue Totem nerf, it's been one of the linchpins of aggressively slanted shaman strategies for a very long time. So this nerf is looking to make Even Shaman a lot more of a true mid-range deck and make this card in general just go into mid-range decks as opposed to just being like one of the best 2-drops in the game that you just jam in most of your aggressively bent decks and then just get value out of it. So you have to really consider this in deck building. You probably won't see it a ton anymore, but it's the effect's still quite powerful, but at 2 is a little too efficient. Equality is a really interesting one because they don't want to make it cost 3 because then Odd Paladin gets Equality, and that would be a messed up world to live in. So they moved it to 4, so you could still play it in Even, but it is much worse. You can't get it in an Odd, and it makes Control a little awkward because it's a weird thing for Control and OTK Paladin because usually you're not Pyro Equality on turn 4 anyways. You're usually doing that later in the game. So it costing a bit more mana is a little bit of an issue, but it's not the biggest thing in the world for them because they're looking to clear later. You'll definitely have much more of an argument for running Shrink Rays now in the decks because you wouldn't always run Shrink Ray, but you still might just want the equality because it's a little bit cheaper and easier to clear with. But this is actually kind of it sounds like a meme, but it's a little bit of a buff to Shirvala because instead of equality making her cost 2 less, it makes her cost 4 less. So I mean that's a nice little little buff to Shirvala. Not sure that she needed it, but you definitely are going to be more constrained on mana as the slower paladin strategies, but I think you probably still run some number of equalities. It just you don't get them really in even paladin. Like 4 mana for that effect is, I'm not sure that's what even paladin wants to do. At 2 mana you just shoved it in there because it was just great. You could just clear giant blocker for very low tempo cost, but at 4 it's probably a lot more sketchy. Hunter's Mark, I think Hunter's Mark is really weird because Hunter's Mark has been fine for a long time after they nerfed it from 0 to 1. At 0 it was really strong. At 1 it was fine for a very, very long time until Candleshot came out. Candleshot really broke Hunter's Mark. And I think this nerf is a symptom of Candleshot just existing. And this one looks like a nerf for specifically champs and ladder because Hunter's been like a third of the ladder for a long time. It's probably a little less now, but it's still one of these biggest classes you're going to face on ladder. And all of the decks, every single one of them run Hunter's Mark and Candleshot. So this to me this seems like a little bit more of a short-sighted nerf, and I'm not sure how much I like this one specifically, but we can get into that in a minute. Emerald Spellstone, definitely a nerf for champs and ladder, and this one's so weird because the thing with Emerald Spellstone is that I don't think Emerald Spellstone is the problem with the aggressive secret strategies or even Spell Hunter. What the problem is that not a lot of decks in Standard right now can efficiently 1-for-1 Emerald Spellstone when it's fully upgraded. That's why Priest, part of the reason why Priest is so good right now is Mass Hysteria just 1-for-1s Emerald Spellstone. And the thing is that a lot of other decks will have to commit multiple resources to break up a Spellstone, and then after that they have to deal with a Rexar. So you probably 2-for-1 yourself or worse to clear the 3/3s, and then as opposed to that being Hunter's big push in the mid game, then they can immediately transition to an infinite value engine. And I think Emerald Spellstone is partially dying for the sins of Rexar, which I don't really like because Emerald Spellstone is actually quite good and wild. The Secret Hunter decks are actually pretty decent, and they're like tier 2, tier 3, but they can still compete. Those are like the real viable Hunter strategies, and this just destroys them. This is so hard for them to keep up. Like a 6 mana Spellstone in Wild, like a 5 mana one is like on the brink of being not playable, but 6 mana is just massive for Wild. And I think the real issue here whenever you're playing against the aggressive decks is like you can clear the earlier minions with like Doomsayers, like cheap removal, stuff like that, but then you have to make really awkward plays to deal with the Spellstone. And then after that, they just should be out of gas and be relying on their hero power and just having like 3 or 4 secrets up that just don't do anything, like if you're a slower deck. Or like you should be able to just play around their secrets and stuff like that. But when you're facing down a Rexar after that, you just can't win those games. If they go like secret Spellstone, and then you have to 2-for-1 yourself to deal with that, and then they Rexar afterwards, it's like, oh my god, this is just too much. I can't beat all of this value that I'm hemorrhaging, basically.
Well, and you can even make them rely on Zul'jin instead of Rexar, and at least that's one turn of make so many more minions and I put the shields up with the secrets, but then you get to fight through that, as opposed to Rexar where there is no light at the end of that tunnel.
Yeah, the light at the end of that tunnel is please get bad beast options and don't get lifesteal off of aggro. So, yeah.
Okay, alright, so hear me out. You guys are saying that Hunter's Mark and Emerald Spellstone got nerfed, but what about Even Hunter?
Yo, you can play secrets in Spellstone now.
Yeah, now you can play Secrets and Spellstone, and now you have Hunter's Mark that costs 2, so it can go in there too to go along with your 4 mana deal 3, make a 3/3, and
Flanking strike.
You can flanking strike. Think about the possibilities, and you can play Rexar and Zul'jin in Even Hunter.
Yeah.
Mm? Mm?
You're saying
Maybe
true
it's
statements.
Maybe it's a stealth buff.
No, Botticus. This is even Spell Hunter. We only
know
lose
what?
Rockdalar.
Even Spell Hunter with again in it, so that you can't actually play by to my side.
You know
Well,
what
you just have to
cleanly-
draw you mulligan for the Gen.
cleanly combos with a Hunter's Mark for a 2 mana clear on anything. In Even Hunter, Snow Flipper Penguin. It's basically Candle Shot.
Yeah. Yeah, that's just math.
We could play.
That's
You
just
can
math.
play Wild Pyromancer in this deck, and unlike Equality, it doesn't kill the Pyromancer.
Wow.
Hog.
Well, that's a sound effect that I'm gonna have to add to my soundboard after this episode of you making that noise. There's just so much weird stuff here. Hunter's Mark, I think, is actually a good nerf because we've talked many times about how this format was not board centric enough. Hunter's Mark made it that if you committed anything big to the board, it was just like, nah. That was the big game hunter of this format. And you can't have cards that unilaterally punish you for investing mana into the board. And so, Hunter's Mark is just, it's a card that would hold back a lower powered game because someone would play something big and you'd be like, 1 mana, kill that. And you can't, even without Candle Shot, you can't have that kind of efficiency. And if they get rid of Candle Shot, Spring Paw's around. You can Spring Paw whatever you want with Hunter's Mark. That's like a Candle Shot that's a cat. I'm sure there's a pun there. There's something there. Anyways, we'll come back to that. Pun's not important right now. But Hunter's Mark punishes anyone that spends a lot of mana on a thing, and then you go 1 mana and the rest of my turn. It's the reason why Big Game Hunter got nerfed. I'm not surprised to see this get nerfed. I'm not even sure I'm upset about this as a card being nerfed. I'm upset about Cold Blood, and I'm really upset about Flametongue. Equality, whatever, I get it. And really, Hunter's Mark is equality only one thing, and equality is double the mana, equality all the things. So you just double both. It makes sense. It's just math. I get it. But Flametongue Totem at 3 mana. What does Shaman do in Classic now? What do they have?
Nothing.
Yeah, remember
they
the one good
gutted
card they had?
all of Classic. The only payoff in Classic, the only 2 payoffs actually, are Bloodlust and Hex, and everything else is
And Hex got
straight
nerfed?
up jank.
Hex got nerfed.
Yeah.
And then Cold Blood is a lot of damage. It's a skill testing card. It's a lot of damage. It's burst out of nowhere. It's a combo enabler. I get it. What problem was Cold Blood making? And that's really the question I have about a lot of these. The question about a lot of these, like Appa talked about, are these symptoms or problems? I buy that Hunter's Mark held back anyone that wanted to commit to the board in this format, and that was a thing that you had to be aware of, that you couldn't really do that. With a third of the decks being Hunter, and all of them playing Hunter's Mark, playing a big thing was a bad thing to do. Even Warlocks suffered because playing an 8/8 on turn 3 was bad now. Which is a crazy world to live in. That my 3 mana 8/8
Bruh.
is a disadvantage for me.
I'm so sad about this Flametongue nerf because basically after rotation, anytime rotation happens, Shaman is going to be one of 2 things. One, either entirely reliant on the new set giving them tools, like, Whispers of the Old Gods or like the Grand Tournament, League of Explorers, that kind of stuff. It's basically either entirely going to rely on new releases, or it's going to have to be an environment where Earth Elemental Ancestral Spirit is good. It's one of those 2, because there's really no support for basically any of their Shaman decks in Classic without Flametongue. You could play a mid-range slanted deck with random 1-drops and like top out at Bloodlust at the very least, and that could be like tier 5 or something. But nerfing that entire strategy into the ground basically pretty much leaves you Hex as your best card, and then the strongest thing you can possibly do in Classic, aside from Doomhammer Rockbiter, is Earth Elemental Ancestral Spirit. So those are like the two scenarios we have now. Each time a new set comes out, either it gives something really, really good for Shaman to see play, or it's an Earth Elemental deck.
So, okay. I have Iksar quotes and I have questions for you all. I have two big Iksar quotes that I'm going to boil down here. And there's one that I didn't write down word for word, but we've heard this litany before about the discussion of exit points. About how players, the biggest exit point they can speak to both statistically and anecdotally, is that when someone logs in, their deck has a red X over it. Oftentimes, casual players will see that, log out, and not log back in again. Oh, my deck doesn't work anymore? It's fine, I didn't want to play this stupid game anyway. And I'm not gonna challenge that point. We'll talk about that later. But I really do think the number of people who play this game casually is an order of magnitude, if not multiple orders of magnitude, larger than the number of people that play competitively enough to be listening to this recording right now, for example. Or to listen to any Hearthstone podcast, or even go in the Hearthstone Reddit, or whatever. Secondly, this quote was on Reddit about basic and classic cards and the philosophy behind why they nerf them. Ideally, the basic and classic set show off the kinds of mechanics each class is about without having too many cards that show up in all possible class archetypes. Basic is important to us because it serves as a set of cards players can use to learn about the game before they choose whether or not to make an investment of their time or money. Classic is important to us because it serves as the secondary jump-off point where you learn the baseline for what each of the individual classes is about, along with some of our core mechanics like Battle Cry or Death Rattle. We've been trying to change some of these power outliers over time, but only when making that change might also be positive for the live game environment. We'd like to continue making these types of changes as we believe the game will be in a better position to meet the player expectation that the game is new and fresh from expansion to expansion. Now, we nerf basic and classic cards that are too powerful instead of rotating them when they hit on class fantasy, but are at too high of a power level. Generally, the cards we target for change are ones that exist in every archetype. So they're saying Wild Growth and Nourish represent what they want Druid to do, but they're too good at it, but they still want Druid to do those things and be the class that does those things. They're keeping those specific cards around, just nerfing them.
Look, Rexar, completely fine. Every archetype, no big deal. It's leaving.
Well, he's not
soon.
basic or classic, so it's very
Barnes?
clearly viewed
Barnes
with a
is
different microscope. And then the last point that he made sure to mention that I thought was interesting, Odd Paladin and Equality not being 3 are unrelated. Classic and basic cards are so powerful they are in every archetype and every expansion is something that is harmful to the goal of expansion metas feeling fresh and new. Equality at 3 in our playtesting did not solve this. I buy that. And you know what? In your control decks, keep Equality in. It is still good. It is still a good card. It was probably costed incorrectly. But there's other stuff going on here. I have questions, gentlemen. I have questions. Do you believe these are power level nerfs? Nerfs to shake up the meta and re-engage disillusioned players, or both?
Both and a third thing.
Botticus?
Oh, I thought he was gonna say what the third thing was.
Well, he's going to, but I want to know what you say about the first two things first.
I was gonna say re-engagement only. I don't know that any of these really felt like they were out of line power level wise.
Well, this is actually kind of interesting because in Wild, both Cold Blood and even Flametongue Totem were very, very good, and they carried their respective decks. So this is actually kind of a nod towards Wild. It's a very subtle one, but I think it was definitely made with it in mind as well as rotation. So in that sense, I think they were like efficiency nerfs. They're not like, oh, these cards are like busted. It's like these are a little too efficient and they do a little too much, and they'll probably make their respective archetypes a little too strong comparatively to the rest of what they're getting come rotation. And then it also helps to shake up the Wild metagame because both of those decks were like have been tier 1 basically for a while. But the third thing is they want to sell packs. and it makes sense to hit Classic and get rid of the Classic tools, make people want to invest in the expansions that have come out, which also makes sense why they don't want to nerf Gen and Baku, because they're in the Witchwood and they're legendaries, and you have to get them.
That is cynical and totally plausible, and I'm not going to disagree with that. And I do think we are very clearly getting a shift internally from Team 5 towards Wild being a relevant thing that they care about and push. Because in Wild, you play your Classic and Basic cards, which we've been informed the biggest exit point for casual players when they can't play with the cards they have. And I don't know how many of them had Azure Drakes around, or how many of them had Ice Blocks or whatever. If you're a casual player and you have an Ice Block, you're not really a casual player. I don't care if I speed bump you on my way to whatever Wild Legend. But even then, the environment of Wild is permanent. There are no exit points there. And it is also something that is an additional game mode if Blizzard puts energy into it. So this is a pretty clear indication they're putting energy into it. But here's the other question. Well, one of many other questions. The frequency of nerfs. This is twice in one expansion in 2 months. Twice in 2 months that they've nerfed cards. Both times these nerfs were major players from Classic that had been played for literally years. What is the impact of so many frequent nerfs that are standard relevant and just universally relevant on the player base's trust in the consistency of these cards? And of cards in general.
Well, it's kind of twofold here, because like one, frequent nerfs are like, okay, you're having balance issues, and these balance issues are like frequent. That could be one way to interpret it, but the way I'm interpreting it is that I think since they're basically buckling down on we're not rotating Classic, part of the problem with Basic and Classic is you just play all the same cards anyways. So if they nerf all the cards that you're playing anyways, then rotations will probably start to look a little bit different, and you'll rely less on Classic and Basic. You'll still have the tools there that are kind of iconic to the class's archetype, except for Shaman and Priest, rip. So in that sense, it's like they're trying to really mold Classic and Basic to have some tools for deck builders to reach into, but not start with like 16 Classic and Basic cards and then new cards from the set. I think they want to make the new sets more impactful by reducing the power level of Classic and Basic. So in that way, I think it's actually kind of good that they're frequent enough, because if you're tinkering with the power level of Classic and Basic and then you see more cards like from those sets rise to the top, then you'll probably want to nerf a little more frequently, like maybe twice in an expansion, to get the set to where you really want it to be in terms of power level. So like what they did with Nourish and Wild Growth, they nerfed that, and then there were some other problematic cards that were still popping up. Like you could argue that Cold Blood and Flametongue were a little bit problematic across some formats, but then they see where that is, and then they tinker with those numbers, and then maybe they'll find something else in a little bit that they want to tinker with relatively soon. So maybe they'll nerf something else in a couple months. I'm okay with that if they just keep it consistent. I'm fine with that if they're trying to just curate the Basic and Classic set to be where they want it in terms of what you include in deck lists come expansion, come new sets, stuff like that, rotation, all that kind of stuff. So as long as they stick with it and stick with this philosophy, I'm fine with it.
I honestly couldn't tell you what the impact is. From my point of view, this did not feel like a positive balance patch. I don't know that the cards that they are touching needed to be touched. It just felt really weird, and I can't imagine it being a positive thing for player re-engagement, but I very well could be wrong. I don't really know what I guess I don't necessarily have the pulse that I've had before on the community, but I don't really recall too many of these things being talked about it feels like it's more of a general. If there's a dissatisfaction with Hearthstone, it's more of a general dissatisfaction and not necessarily specifically on any cards outside of maybe Rexar. But even then, I feel like the hate for Rexar has not even come close to the hate for something like Barnes. But that also could just be the groups that I follow. So
Yeah,
I don't know.
I
This
think
doesn't feel great.
yeah, this balance patch I think has been perceived relatively negatively from at least what I've seen. And of course, I am in my own little bubble, and I don't speak for everyone or see all the different perspectives that people have. But I think what it is that makes this perceived really negatively is that there have been a lot of really prominent community members, Kibler being one of the most prominent ones, pointing out that Gen and Baku are like consistency issues in game, and they're kind of problems. And I don't think he's wrong at all. I think they are. So seeing them basically say we're not touching them, we're balancing around them, probably frustrates a lot of people, because the games are going to still feel really samey, and it's going to feel really similar to what we've been playing most likely in terms of like Gen and Baku decks. We may not see like the same ones, but I mean Gen and Baku just kind of make games very, very similar, and that's not really what a lot of people play Hearthstone for. They play for the really crazy moments. They play for playing matchups differently. And like I I I was talking on Twitter with Earl earlier, and I think Matt at Arms. We had a little thread about talking about how in aggro matchups the past year it's felt like the coin disparity is really, really massive. When we talked about this before, and I had the thought that I think it's just because in the Gen and Baku mirrors for whatever deck you're playing, like let's say Even Shaman, for example, there's a little bit of play there in standard. Let's take the standard deck for instance. Like if you have Hex, or if you can Flametongue with tempo or something, there's like some swing turns you can have. But for the most part, these matchups it feels like you're on It's a Small World, the ride at Disney. It feels like you're on rails, where there's not a lot that you can do. It feels like whenever you queue up a game and like you hit a mirror or an aggro mirror, and you're either Gen or Baku deck, you just get in the little car and you go through the ride. And there's not a lot of different stuff that happens each time. Feels like you're just riding It's a Small World 50 times in a row whenever you queue up on ladder and you like queue up into these mirror matchups. I think it just feels bad to have that level of consistency, which is weird.
I think I'm trying to piece this together in my head kind of as I speak, but it feels to me that Hearthstone feels at its worst when you play against a strategy that can completely invalidate your deck. So back when aggro was the most common archetype for most decks, a lot of people didn't feel great when everybody's playing aggro because it kind of invalidates any strategy that is trying to do something kind of cool. And right now we have the super OTK meta where it kind of doesn't matter what you do throughout the game because you just die to the OTK eventually. So that might be a reason that things don't feel great, and maybe kind of why Ungoro was such a great meta, because while there were some very powerful decks, it felt like you could come up with strategies that weren't completely invalidated by a certain subset of cards.
Also, the Angora meta came after rotation, and things were new and fresh, and the reason Witchwood was less fun is because we were still playing in the KNC meta, because that set was loco bananas crazy, and then we just added Gen and Baku on top of it.
We're still seeing it get nerfed with Spellstone.
Yep.
BT dubs.
Yep.
So that actually
yeah.
just went up in my busted sets list even longer.
Yeah, it's
or even higher.
And I have listed later down here discussing about the engagement with Hearthstone. We can talk about that a little bit now, because The question that I have is why the nerfs, and I don't think there's any real answer that stands out other than people are playing less, right? And I'll give you my conspiracy theory, right? I'll give you what I think is happening, because you piece together the different things that are happening here. I believe Iksar when he says the vast majority of players would seek an exit point from getting rid of classic and basic cards, because I believe the vast majority of players, the vast majority, are hyper casual. And I bet they spend money on promotions, like the Lunar Festival we have right now, or the Welcome Bundle, or on classic cards because they see a cool card and they want to buy it, or when a new set comes out, they might buy something because it pops up and it gives them a few packs and they want a few more, but they spend money like they spend money on Candy Crush or something equivalent. It is meant to be a throwaway dollar amount that is meant to momentarily change their experience in the game and increase their effectiveness. Sure, I firmly believe that. I firmly believe that WILD is getting pushed, not just because the second game mode that they can basically have for free, not just because it encourages players to go in the online store, but because it allows those players that don't buy new cards to keep the same deck forever and log in whenever they get bored at the doctor's office and they're sitting in the MRI table for an hour and a half, and just the same deck is still there. You just click play. Fine. And I believe that they spend less money than a whale individually, but more total altogether. And that means that these changes of nerfing cards by 1 mana make a lot of sense in that context. And that means the nerfs right now actually make more sense, because every time this past year, they've waited until a set has been out for 2 months, and they've nerfed cards halfway through the set's lifespan. They did it again this time. This is exactly 2 months after the set came out, in line with a sale halfway through the set's duration. I don't think that these nerfs were desperate. I think these nerfs were scheduled. I think these nerfs were intended. I think these nerfs were planned. I think the last set of nerfs was the desperate nerfs, because it was 13 days after Rastakhan's, and they were slammed onto the ladder with 24 hours notice, the literal fastest they could get it possibly done, because people weren't buying enough Rastakhan's packs during Christmas. My theory is that they do need to nerf to make more people play, because they don't know what's wrong, but they know something is wrong. And I don't know if we know what's wrong either, but that the nerfs that we got here were scheduled the second the set came out, if not before. That they have nerfs at this point frequently enough to be every 2 months after the sets come out. Right on time.
You can take that as a negative thing, which, I mean, I think that's totally reasonable to view that in a negative light, but I'm kind of viewing it in almost like a positive light, because
I think it's a huge positive. I think it's a really big improvement, because I would take this every single time over spirit clauses in your life for 6 months now, and just live with that as part of your day-to-day existence. I would take this.
Just doesn't get touched for like a year and a half,
and then gets nerfed on the last 2 months he's in standards as a big F you to all the players that had to deal with him, and then you had to craft him, and now look, he's a 1/1 that doesn't charge. Yeah,
like I'm perfectly fine living in a world where the reasoning behind frequent nerfs is to sell packs and make money. I'm okay with that.
Sure.
You could think of that as like, oh, it's a greedy thing, but I mean, their business, it makes sense. They need to make money, and if this ends up making changes and making the game more enjoyable for these periods of time, I'm down with that. But if they're going to have their hand so active in the meta and basically like micromanage what's going on, I just hope they keep being consistent with it, because if there's problems, they'll need to address them. So
yeah,
I'm down with these frequent nerfs, but if they're going to have the frequent nerfs, I just want them to keep having them. I don't want them to just have these frequent nerfs and then just have us have a spirit clause again.
Well, they won't, but the inconsistency here is with the first round of nerfs they did with Rastakhan's. The emergency, we just released the set, it's not making enough money, we're changing cards that you've played with forever right now in a massive way, and deleting a class from the ladder. I don't care for that, and I think that these nerfs are a lot harder to process because they're in the shadow of the ones that we had 6 weeks ago. That is what I have difficulty with. That you can't make the argument at the same time that you get major exit points from cards changing and then keep changing cards. I don't buy that. You can't do both. And I think that it's upsetting that Team 5 is destabilizing the game of the present by overvaluing the existence of their past creations. They're much more willing to change things, especially in the standard environment, and with what's going on right now. But the temporary cards are Gen and Baku, another year in standard. It feels like it's going to be literally forever, but it's not. In Wild, it'll be literally forever. But Wild Growth, Flametongue Totem, these are cards we've played with since 2013. And I'm not saying they need to stay the same forever, but I'm saying we are losing the experience to have the feeling of playing with these cards in this current format. And cards don't feel like a consistent commodity that I can depend on to stay the same anymore. And for a long time, their litany was, your cards will feel like they are your thing that you own. If they're not following that design philosophy anymore, why don't they buff cards? Why don't they make bad cards, especially in Classic, better? And by extension, if you're changing the cards in Classic by making some worse, why not take out Wild Growth and put in Mire Keeper? Or take out Nourish and put in Mire Keeper? Why not put in Pilfered Power or Jade Blossom? If it's just Jade Blossom, it's okay. No Idol, just Jade Blossom. If it's just Jade Blossom, it's okay. But put in something that does the same effect, but isn't the same card. And make a core set. Because if you keep just changing Classic and it's a little bit different every year, that's called a core set. You're making a core set. Our Classic set no longer has about 10 cards that we started with. There's no more Cold Blood Oracle. There's no more Ice Block. Cold Blood is different. There's no more PO, and Soulfire isn't 0 anymore, which is fine. But there's a lot of changes that they're making every year by both removing and altering cards. They say they don't want a core set, but this is a core set. And they haven't buffed
cards to it too.
Yeah. They're making a core set.
So they can add cards to it. Why not add cards that have existed?
Or why not buff cards?
They know how the power level is in a relative format. You don't obviously know exactly how powerful it is, but Mire Keeper's perfect example of a very solid card that could easily go into the core set.
And why not just you have Wild Growth, make Mild Growth. It's Wild Growth except it costs 3. And then if a player queues up a standard deck and they open the client and they had a Wild Growth in their deck, oh, that card is no longer legal, but press this button, we'll put Mild Growth in your deck instead and it'll do the same thing. Okay, fine. But it's a core set without the trust right now. It's just Classic, except sometimes they mess with stuff and we deal with it, but they are artificially limiting themselves and artificially destabilizing our experience with these cards, and now we can never play with 1 mana Cold Blood again. We can never do it. We can never play with 2 mana Flametongue again. We can never experience old Blade Flurry. We can never experience any of these cards, and for many players were formative for Hearthstone. Kevin Hovdestad talked about this on the IDMs podcast about a game as service now. And that the history of what it was like to play Hearthstone back in the famous Wreckful game, right, of missing lethal by not going 14 with 8 mana Pyroblast. I'm not saying I want 8 mana Pyroblast in Standard. Please don't think I'm saying that. I'm really not. But I am saying you can't go back and recreate that game. You can't go back and have that same experience as that player you watched. And these videos are on YouTube. You can go back and watch it, but you can't do it anymore because it's a game as a service. You're subscribing to what it is now, but what it was is lost. And every time a card is changed, that gets taken away from us a little bit more. Because Blizzard is unwilling to make a rotating set of permanently playable cards in every format, and instead, they take our set that we are supposed to have forever, and they've changed over a third of the cards in it by either obliquely or by explicitly taking them away and putting them in Wild only, or by altering them from what they once were. And it just it removes us from memories that we had and reduces us to, back in my day, you got to do this and this, and it's a fun story, but you can't show somebody. You can't share that experience. And I wish that there was some additional respect for the way the game was built and respect for the players and the understanding they might have, if you give me a new thing that's slightly different from the old thing, but let me keep the old thing sometimes, maybe that's better. I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy, but
It was so hard for me to process all of that information right there because I've been thinking about a specific line that you said, which I think I might be paraphrasing, but I think I'm quoting correctly. You said they're undervaluing the present by overvaluing the creations of the past.
yeah,
And all I have to say is I think you should make fortune cookies
I would eat them all. I'd be fat.
because that sounds like something I would crack open a fortune cookie and be like, don't undervalue the present by overvaluing the creations of the past.
Yeah, well, I mean, but that's what's happening here. They're saying, we know Classic is flawed, but we don't want to take it away from people, so we'll just slightly change it over time. And in the process, you're going to be stuck with things that we know are broken because we don't have faith that the vast majority of our player base can handle a new version of the same effect that we give to them. And all you have to do, make a new version of Wild Growth or whatever and just give it to people. Replace it in their collection, give them a new copy in their collection. When they Hall of Fame cards, they are more than willing to give us the dust and let us keep the card. Do that again. Hall of Fame Classic. And give us Classic 2, Electric Boogaloo, and just keep doing that. People will eventually get used to it the same way they got used to standard rotating. It didn't kill the game. People are still making a ton of money. So, I don't see any reason why they can't iterate on what they've learned over the past 5 years in a way that respects their own history and their players on all ends of the spectrum. And I think that by saying our players aren't able to comprehend changing cards and new copies or new versions of these older cards, that we're not going to change it and we're going to punish everyone involved. It seems so short-sighted.
I don't know where to go from there. It's just kind of sad. Yeah. I don't know what to say other than it's very unfortunate. I think that we're obviously not the only ones that feel like something needs to happen, something more than this needed or needs to happen to the basic and classic set. But
Well, let me ask you, Botticus, because I think we all agree that there's probably been, within us and within the community at large, there's been a pretty significant downturn in how much Hearthstone we're all playing right now. Why? Why do we think that players are disengaging from the game in whatever context?
I'm not sure I can accurately give an opinion on this, considering I played 56 games of Hearthstone yesterday.
Well, sure, but they gave you something to work for, right? They said, here's your tournament mode. Go play Wild Ladder until your eyes bleed. So you had a thing to go get, and you got it. I mean, Botticus, what do you think? If you want to make it personal, you can talk about what's kind of kept you from engaging with the game a little bit more. What's made you change your focus, or why you think the community at large, from what we've seen, has decided to take a different approach with their time.
So for me, it's kind of a myriad of different reasonings for engaging with the game less. I mean, I've definitely played 56 games in a day before, and I could not imagine doing that anymore. It's kind of a thing I've talked about before about kind of how lonely the game was getting for me. I felt I didn't once I had played games with other people, when I started starting to play WoW and I was playing games with other people, I realized how lonely of an experience doing the end of season ladder grind was. And while didn't um I enjoyed it more than most other people seemed to enjoy it. I think largely that was because I was still improving and still getting better, and it felt I could sense the improvement, and I could generally get into a decent headspace while doing it. But now I don't feel like I have anything to chase or that I really want to chase, as well as having other commitments that I've subjected myself to that doesn't allow for me to put in the amount of time that I used to. And so, since I'm not able to get out of it what I was getting before by playing as many games as I used to play, I just haven't put the time in that I had before.
That I can actually relate to something you said there a lot, which was, I mean, it's a pretty lonely experience in terms of like you're doing it by yourself, and it's not like a game that you play with like friends and stuff. And I I really relate to that because after the ladder grind was over, I did not want to play Hearthstone. I immediately went to bed after the ladder reset happened because I was anxiously watching my ranks slowly decay. But the only thing I really wanted to do today, I played a couple games of ladder with like arena mage deck that I'm trying out because it seemed fun in my head, and it's fun, not very good, but fun. But the thing I really wanted to do today was just like play Overwatch with some of my friends because like I did the thing, I got the carrot. Now I gotta wait to get the email from Blizzard about wild playoffs so I can start prepping and stuff like that. Uh, but in the interim, I just kind of want to like chill and do social stuff because I spent a lot of time this past month just in front of my computer, just grinding wild. So, and like if Taylor wasn't here next to me, like if she didn't play wild as well, it would honestly be like super lonely. And like whenever I was living at my parents' house, like and I wasn't in a relationship or anything, like just playing in my room all the time was also a point where I just stopped playing Hearthstone, which was the even shaman meta, which I hated, but it was also super lonely because all of my other friends were playing like WoW and Overwatch and stuff, and eventually I just stopped laddering and just played that because I didn't really have anything to work for. I didn't enjoy the meta, which seems like a place where a lot of people are at. And I mean, if you have the option of playing a non-enjoyable meta to you for no tangible gain or doing something else with friends, seems like the choice is pretty easy.
And I think what I'm landing on here is I don't think that the 10 hours a month Hearthstone existence is a negative one. I don't think that sharing our time with other games is a bad one. Don't think there's a problem with resetting four ranks. I do think, if I were to give personal feedback, one of the reasons that I don't play Hearthstone as much because I lack goals given what I've already accomplished, but I don't want to say that's everyone's experience. Everyone has their own ranked goals and they can move up. And Legend is difficult, and I do remember the first time hitting it, and the first bunch of times hitting it, it was still very exciting. And you know what? I still enjoy it every time I hit it. But I think the real question is not why is it less now? Because in retrospect, this is about a normal amount of time to spend in a game and you share it with other games in your time. I think the question is why was it so crazy, addictive, and engrossing before? If we weren't used to Hearthstone being a every single day for an hour plus thing in prior metas and prior existences, we probably wouldn't be noticing the difference now and saying, yeah, this is bad. No, this is normal because there are very, very few games that I will play for more than I play even Hearthstone currently. But the amount we were playing before when it was full tilt engaging, I think back to the Angora meta and how much I played Hearthstone back then. I must have hit over like 40 or 50 hours in a single month. What made that happen? Because that's really the question here of what was it giving us before as opposed to what is not there now.
For me, it felt like tangible improvement. I could see myself improving. I felt like I was getting to a point where I was playing extremely well, and I kept climbing the ladder, and my results were getting better, and I got a couple finishes, and then I think it just kind of got to a point where it felt like the amount of time I would have to invest to get to that next level was not a realistic thing for me to be able to do. And once I took a step back, it became easier and easier to continually take more and more steps back
So
as I put my
so
focus somewhere
let
else.
me ask you this, because the improvement or lack of feeling like improvement and stuff like that makes a lot of sense, but I hear this. I'm gonna say complaint because I'm blanking on a better word, but I hear this complaint a lot about Gen and Baku being issues, which I totally agree with. But I think that might actually be one of the core issues you're having exit points. And it's not a very obvious exit point, but what I'm thinking back to is one of the last times that I saw Botticus like really grinding ladder a lot, because he still plays. It's not like we've just quit on the podcast. Like Hat and Botticus still play, they just don't grind nearly as much. I think one of the last times I really remember grinding with Botticus, because we would just be online together all the time, was after K&C came out, after like the Nerfs and stuff, because we played a bananas amount of Dragon Combo Priest because we were both on that deck, and it was super fun. And then the
And
Witchwood
even
came
Paladin,
out.
I played a ton of even Paladin with Call to Arms.
Yeah, and then when Witchwood came out after, we still played. Yeah, well, Botticus was still playing a lot more, but it seemed like halfway through there is when you started picking up WoW, and then the Boomsday Project, you tapered off a little more, and even Roscon's Rumble, like you're still playing, but you're still kind of splitting your time probably more towards WoW than Hearthstone these days. And I think the timeline of that happening, paired up with Gen and Baku coming into existence and staying here, is a little bit more than coincidental.
Yeah, I mean that makes a lot of sense, because you're right. Actually, I was starting to play significantly less when even Paladin was that kind of start. It didn't. I couldn't draw a direct correlation with it, but that makes a lot of sense. The When even Paladin was a thing, that kind of started the reduction in my play a little bit. And when Dragon Combo Priest was a thing, I was grinding. I was playing so many games. So yeah, I mean that maybe Gen Baku is having more of an effect than it feels like it is on my enjoyment of the game. Because those decks definitely don't feel they feel repetitive, and from what I gather, my enjoyment of the game largely comes from games that are not repetitive.
Yeah, like you love cloning Elder Priest with Lyra in there because every game's different.
Yep.
Gen and Baku are inherently going to be very close to similar. Like you don't really have many random effects in there, except for like Swashbuckler and Wild or like Murmuring Elemental in Standard. But like the games are very similar. You're playing a lot of the games like you're on rails, like you're on an amusement park ride, and there's not a ton of like random effects, which if they're done right can be extremely fun. That's why I love playing with Hagatha in Standard, because all the games get completely wild. They get crazy after Hagatha comes down, and then a lot of variance is injected into it in a very healthy way. Whereas, say in Wild with Even Shaman without Hagatha, all of my games felt the exact same. Even if I got different draws, they
Yeah.
all felt all right. Coin out Totem Golem on 1, Totem on 2, Flametongue Totem on 3, curve into a 4-drop. It's like all of my my entire curve for the entirety of the game was planned out in advance, regardless of what my opponent did, because it was just the most efficient thing to do. And that's kind of just what Gen and Baku create that environment. And I think that honestly sucks for most people because randomness is fun. Like it sucks to be on the losing end of it, but like one of the most like one
Some
of the
randomness is
biggest
fun.
moments.
Some randomness is
What?
fun, and then some
Yeah.
cards are named Crackle. Like there's variance
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, Crackle's not
Wait,
a good one.
Yeah,
But
Crackle
like
and
one of the best moments, like basically in Hearthstone's history, is the Paveling book. Like it was really cool to see happen, and Amnesiac still feel for him for that, but like it's just an enjoyable spectator experience and in-game experience, I think, when it's done well. Not saying Babbling Book was done well, but you get what I'm saying. And these 2 cards that by themselves reduce the randomness and the variance in games and the differences in separate games and in sessions is, I think, driving a lot of people away, and just not in an obvious way. Like, people are putting like Witch's Cauldron and Prince Liam and Odd Paladin when they're not very good because it's something different. It makes the games different. Like, if you Prince Liam, all right, cool, now you got some different stuff to do. You're not just drawing raid leaders and doing the same thing every turn. You're getting different cards, and like Witch's Cauldron, that card's crazy. The games turn into nonsense when you have Witch's Cauldron, and that's super fun to play with.
Yeah, and
Yeah, I got really excited about Witch's Cauldron Odd Paladin, actually. I was really sad when it kind of started working its way out of the deck.
because doing the same thing, if it's consistently powerful, is objectively better in a competitive sense than allowing variance into your strategy. And ultimately, I think, Appa, that you've hit on what my theory is, but not just Genenbaku, not just the sameness of the games, but in over time, the decrease in variance in the player's experience in Hearthstone, the decrease in goals, the decrease in perceived progress, and the decrease in variance within the games. Because the most fun part for me of the old grind, from 16 to Legend every single month, was either pick a deck that I was bad at or didn't know, or see how fast I could get there, or see how far I could get there with a bad deck, with something that was decidedly suboptimal. I really enjoyed, in the mid-range Salmon Karazhan meta, getting to Legend with Cloaked Huntress Secret Hunter. Really enjoyed that. Deck was fine, and the reason that you could get to Legend with it, if you played correctly, was you would unleash the hounds when they had 6 totems on board, and that was all face. That's where that went. You didn't trade. People would trade and be like, I lost. It's like, you should have gone face. It's 3 mana, deal 6, go face. But now, you start at rank 4, no win streaks, major compression of skill, and games take a lot longer because of hero powers and death knights, which are designed to regress the game to the same state. You don't progress in a variant way on the ladder. At least it doesn't feel as variant, even though it might be with the volume of games you have to play from rank 4 to Legend. It might be variant, but it's in a much smaller number of ranks. It's less variant in the games themselves, because our standard meta is based around cards that are decidedly too consistent. Genbaku and Recruit cards. And decks that draw their entire deck and then deal you either 25 or literally say win the game. Or play Rexar and then just make beasts until I can't take any more beasts. And then the removal...
Vicious Gurubashi chicken scale hides.
Yes. Well, and there's... I will say, that's an example of positive variance, in my humble opinion, even though the variance was inflicted upon you. Something like that, if it wasn't happening all the time, would be pretty cool. But it's happening all the time. And then also the removal of goals. And Appa, I think you can look at your journey through Wild was pretty amazing, because you had something to play for, and then you're like, well, I want to play. I'm going to play a crazy amount of Hearthstone. I'm going to just play a ton. And that's pretty cool, that they're still able to get people that are as invested over time as you, just by saying, here's the carrot, go grab it. But for your average player, and especially for people that aren't invested in the tournament scene, after you get the golden classes, if you want to hit Legend after you hit Legend, there still isn't the answer for what to do next. And Wild will be something. I think it's great that they're incentivizing Wild. I just think the game is missing on variance of day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month experience. Part of that's with the cards, but not all of it. Part of it's with just the structure of how the ladder works these days. And yeah. I don't know what the change is there that they can use to fix it.
I'm gonna let us go to outro after this, because we're starting to get up to 2 hours, so that's like traditional coin concede cutoff time. But I remember the Ungoro meta, and some of the things that I remember about that distinctly making some of the most fun games were Gentle Megasaur, was pretty cool because Murloc Paladin was pretty good. But Dragon Priest was really powerful, and you had controlled randomness with Operative, but that deck also ran Elise and Shadow Visions, and those games were awesome. Playing with that combo and getting a pack off of your Shadow Visions, and then just figuring out to do with these random nonsense cards you just got, and figuring out how to make them most efficient was really fun. And then like Primordial Glyph, the Gunther Mage deck, was so much fun to play, and Primordial Glyph had a lot to do with that because you could just get a bunch of randomly powerful cards, or you could brick and try and like make some stuff efficient.
And Firelens
And-
Portal and Medivh were in that deck, which also had a ton of variance to them.
Yep. I mean, Taunt Warrior is pretty good, and I mean the rag shots are inherently very random. There was just a bunch of stuff going on in that format, and I think that's pretty widely regarded as like one of the better formats of all time. And a lot of it had very controlled variants, which
Especially after they nerfed Quest Rogue.
yeah, Quest Rogue was like the consistency deck, and it sucked to play against. And then after they
Yeah.
nerfed that, then the controlled variance decks were like much more powerful.
And that was still the worst Quest Rogue has ever been, by the way, was in that format back when it was the
Yeah.
original Quest because it lacked all the defensive tools.
And
Yeah.
there were better aggressive decks like Pirate Warrior.
Yep, and there was no Wax Elemental and no Sonya and no Giggling Inventor and no Vicious Scalehide. Yeah. Yeah, I like that meta.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
you could do anything, and all the decks had some level of variance built into them, but also the strategies were all consistently situated. They were all good against each other in various different ways. It was really cool. You could play something different
Yeah,
every
you
week or
had
month.
a really distinct game plan depending on what deck you queued up or brought to a tournament or whatever, what deck you were playing at the time. You had a very specific strategy, but then it just deviated in the mid game a lot of the times, and there were so many different branches that happened in games because you had these random things happen, which were not overbearing. They were powerful, but they were very controlled. And right now, you just don't have that. You just have a very specific strategy, and then it just stays the same. It never deviates unless you're running like the most fun part of games for me in standard with odd and like even decks like Odd Warriors. Like when the Dr. Boom hits, I'm like, thank God it's not just tank up again. Thank you, we have something else to do. Or Hagatha and even Shaman's like, now we get to have fun. Cool. But like having it only get to that point whenever you play these cards that introduce variants, I think kind of sucks. And I think that's just sort of indicative of Gen and Baku being problems. And I don't know, there's just a theory I kind of developed over the show is that I think Gen and Baku are actually driving people away, which is weird. And I have totally scientific anecdotes to support that. So
All right. We talked for an hour. Speaking of cards that were nerfed.
How long can this go on?
Well, we want to give thanks to the many folks that help Coin Concede run. Check out our thanks section on our website of coinconcede.com. You can find our contact info, our show notes, and our Patreon information. You can support our show at patreon.com/coinconcede. You can join us every week live by being at twitch.tv/coinconcedepodcast. Join our community chats and our Discord at discord.coinconcede.com. Write into our email at coinconcede@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at coinconcede. Like, share, and follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/coinconcede. If you'd like CC swag, head on over to our shop at shop.coinconcede.com. And big thanks to our producers, Viriatus, Tacos, Ryan, and Donald. For my shoutouts, I'm going to go first for my Coin Concedes. Gobin, he wrote into our show right before the bonus episode, and I didn't catch it, but he was commenting on episode 170. No questions there, just wanted to tell me that I was right, so of course I'm very appreciative of that. And Gobin, you're a good dude. Thank you so much for writing, and sorry we missed your email on the bonus episode, but I appreciate you listening to the show. My eye doctor, those of you watching the live stream might notice I'm wearing glasses. That is now a thing that I do. My eye doctor, I respect her low-key but firm approach of when I'm looking through the machine. She says, well, there's definitely a prescription there. And when she helps me try on glasses, asking if they're comfortable, and I'm like, well, this pair is a little bit more stylish, but this pair is really comfortable. I barely notice them. It's like, you should pick a comfortable pair, and if you're comfortable, you should probably wear them every day. Like, okay, doctor, I see what you're saying. So
Pick the ones that fit on your face the best, because you should wear them a lot.
yes. So I think that I probably should have been wearing glasses for longer than I have, but on this side of 30, I am now asking the questions of, my eyes work fine now, how do I keep them that way? And then she low-key gave me a wear these every day, so now I do. So that's a thing, but props to her for being good at her job. And Coin Concede to Cold Blood, because I have played Coin Cold Blood, my opponent has conceded multiple times. Cold Blood, you have been there for me for a very long time, and on 1 mana, you taught me the value of going face, and the value of being a rogue, and I will always love you. Botticus. Coin Concede for
I was
me.
waiting for you to queue up. And I...
No Whitney. Wait, I do have a song, though.
Wrong, 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 wrong. Wrong, 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 wrong. You're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong.
For those of you not in the live stream, Botticus just turned off his camera. I think he's done. I think he's going to start a WoW podcast now.
Don't think I haven't actually considered that. But anyway, despite Hat's best efforts, gosh. All right. I would like to coin concede to Lore Master oh Jesus. All right, I would like to coin concede to Lore Master Eve for giving me a very nice compliment in Twitch chat earlier and during the live show, and very happy to see she's back over there at Felon's Chosen. If you're not already listening to them, really make sure you go check them out because it's a great podcast. So, thank you for the nice compliment, and I hate you, Hat. Appa.
Appa.
So my coin concedes are to 1, Cream Puff again for the pep talk in the middle of the ladder session that really stuck with me and helped me keep my head on straight. Control and his group of friends for his Watchstone stream and having me on there. That was really cool. I went back and watched some of my games, and a lot of the different lines they were talking about made a lot of sense, so it gave me a lot to think about. Big thanks to everybody who congratulated me on finishing, because I am very proud of myself. I don't usually feel like I get to say that, because I usually feel really unsure of myself and lack a lot of confidence, but I'm very proud of myself this month. So thanks to everybody who congratulated me and helped me feel even more validated. And my last coin concede, and my biggest one, is to Flametongue Totem, because that card has carried me to a lot of results, and I want to thank it for carrying me again, because I'm not going to be able to get to play it in the Wild Open. So, thanks, buddy. We did it again.
I don't have a crying bumper. That's as close as I get. So, well, it's been an episode. Keep calm. And Botticus is not actually quitting the podcast. And if you see us on the ladder, coin concede.
Coin concede.
Coin concede.
Take cold comfort in your victory. You win. I can rest now. You win. For now. Now, your victory proves nothing.
The day is yours.
I choose death. You have triumphed. This time, this hunt is yours.